Welcome to Who's the Champ. I'm your host, Chris Helms. We're here for part two. Last night we sat down and we talked with Dendra Penance and Kurtis Black, an independent wrestling duo, husband and wife, a valet and promoters, pretty much of the old school style of the National Wrestling Alliance, where it was a territory based. And we sat down and we talked about the territories and we talked about bringing everything together. So tonight I want to bring to you part two of that conversation. When we last left, Kurtis was telling us about the sign of respect he got from a huge fan base that's known to be crazy and wild. But tonight, let's see where our conversation took us and answer the question, are you a pro wrestler or a sports entertainer? Let's take a look. So let me ask you one thing. Since we're talking about this, you talked about Yuta Wheeler and everything, and one of the questions that I've been asking a lot lately, especially since now you've actually used the internet a lot to your advantage. Do you consider the internet to hinder professional wrestling now, or do you see it as a promotion platform? But how do you look at the internet now, since this has been around for so long now? But you have some old school wrestling guys who are just like they hate the breaking of kayfabe. They hate all this different stuff. How do you see the internet, and how do you use it to your advantage?
I believe to each his own.
Mm-hmm.
You can use internet because the internet it's a tool. People use it as their life. It's a tool, and you can use that tool for good. You can use that tool for evil. You can use that tool to diminish. You can use that tool to build
Mm-hmm.
and uplift individuals. You see what I'm saying? And that's what I choose to use the internet for. Kayfabe. There are individuals that are gonna break kayfabe. We know that. I mean, let's just call it for what it is. WWE has pretty much just yeah.
Oh, tore it right off the wall. There's no pulling the curtain back. It's literally been yanked off the wall.
Exactly. So it's now that the curtain's been yanked down, it's literally to each his own. It's how do you forge a better product that's now believable. Now you can take that as, hey, they did that so that way they can monopolize. So you can use that as a challenge. And I and these individuals who I'm rocking with, we choose to use that as a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the challenge? Make your product better. Do you still hold kayfabe, or do you make your product believable? Still believable enough to where fans still believe at some point, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, kayfabe is still there. It's all how willing you are. Those individuals are willing to go hard for the product.
Mm-hmm.
And go hard for the business, and that's where tap wrestling comes into play. Because the individuals who I'm working with, they respect the business, and they know that the curtain's been yanked down. They know that there's no going back. We know that. We know that. But that does not mean you cannot have a product that fans can respect. You see what I'm saying? You don't necessarily have to be WWE. You don't necessarily have to be AEW. You don't have to be New Japan. You don't have to be CMLL or AAA or WWC or All Japan. You don't have to be none of those individuals. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
South America proved that wholeheartedly. They didn't have big names down there. None. None.
None.
But yet and still they drew a crowd that, in a particular area, that the event was not even promoted. And to see that those fans love wrestling so much and they believe it so wholeheartedly that it was like, you know what, let's do them a just favor, because it was deserved. They brought us all down here. We're not going to come down here and waste our time, and we're not in our effort. So let's give these people a show. So me and the wife are here. We told everybody in the locker room, you know, hey, if you got championships, grab them. If you got some best suits, put them on. We're about to go promote right now. And we stood outside of this Coliseum, you know, held 8,000 people, you know, because the promoters, they were afraid that, hey, you know, they're only going to probably draw maybe 1,000, maybe not even 1,000 people, like 200, 300, you know, and these individuals seen us doing what we do.
Very nice.
And we end up drawing in over 1,500 people. And we were like, wow, that's not bad. But what we did not know is that the building that we were in, it was it's a historic building, you know, in that particular province. And what they were faced with was an attendance record that they could not beat. And the attendance record was in a single day. You know, they only drew up to like 300 people in a single day. And and there was a milestone that they couldn't get past. You know, but, you know, we were able to step forward and do what we do. And everybody collaborated to do, you know, to help out, and drew 1,500 plus people, broke records,
Right.
made national news, you know. And what happened next? They invited us and those same individuals, and made an even bigger show the following year, you know. And that following year, in 2024, 4,500 plus people. And not a single WWE wrestler, not a single AEW superstar, not a single nothing. Your typical average indie worker who felt like they had their WrestleMania moment, because it was respect. You know what I'm saying? Those fans, they loved what we were able to do. You know, they loved the product. They loved, you know, seeing our ability, our skill. Iron sharpens iron, you know, and
Yeah.
we gave those individuals a show. And not only that, but it made national news again. So now, you know, you have individuals that are, you know, aware of things are changing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, you know what? If you all gave us that opportunity, let's let's broaden the spectrum, and let's really let's really give individuals an opportunity. It not only broadens their horizon, you know, it doesn't, you know, not only just makes them, you know, feel like instant superstars, but it gives them that courage to step out of their, you know, of their comfort zone. And that was the biggest thing. That's our biggest mission, is to get individuals to step outside their comfort zone, because we know that you have your homegrown individuals, let's say Abbeville, South Carolina, you know, or somewhere out in Western North Carolina, or I don't know, a little small town in Tennessee, you know, but they want to make it to WrestleMania so badly. Well, you know, we may not necessarily be WrestleMania, we may not be the WWE, but hey, we want to help you extend your horizons. We want to help you, you know, try to achieve that opportunity. We want to help you break your, you know, stretch your horizons, get out of that small town. Understand that the world is is a big place, you know. And I've heard the story. she's heard the stories. We've heard many individuals say, well, I wish, well, I wish when you can do it.
And we talked before about your trip to Mexico, and like you were always keeping me updated everywhere you wanted to go. Before we wrap everything up here, I have one question that I try to ask everyone. Are you a pro wrestler or are you a sports entertainer?
Ooh. I am a pro wrestler.
Okay.
I am a pro wrestler.
Tell me the difference.
Say again.
Tell me the difference between a pro wrestler and a sports entertainer.
Okay, so this is the concept that I believe. Pro wrestling is a sport. It's been a sport. It dates back really. If you look at the concept of it, it's really pancration. If you know about pancration, that's so Greek hand to hand combat training. It's literally grappling. And when you look at it, that's really what pro wrestling is. It's evolved from pancration to where it is now. That's why, dare I say, Shane Douglas, he called it the sport of pro wrestling because
Yep.
originally it comes from a sport. Now there are philosophers that believe, and I'm not inclined to disagree, that there are individuals that believe it comes from the Carney days, which that I believe comes from the whole concept of entertainment. Because it came from a carnival. People enjoyed seeing individuals do what they do, in the carnival, and therefore it evolved into where we now know it as sports entertainment. But at the core of it, it's still a sport, and there are countries,
Mm-hmm.
and there are promotions that still believe in that concept of this is a sport, and they believe it wholeheartedly, and they train rigorously as it's a sport. They run, they lift, they eat, they diet, they do it all. They make sure that they do it the right way without taking no juice, you know, and they go out here and they do what they do. Now if they need to, obviously play to the crowd and things like that, that's their prerogative. I choose to believe that if you got it, you have it.
Yeah.
That the fans will gravitate to you, one way or the other, whether they gravitate to you because they think you choke, or they believe that you're a true badass.
Right.
They think that you are a clown. They think that you are let's say a manager, maybe, or a walrus. The fans are going to gravitate to you one way or the other. It's just how well you play that role. How well do you play your character? Now we all know that the philosophy is that we are our characters. Our characters are us turned up to 100. Now, I believe if you go and you be who you are in the ring, that's going to show authentically. If you believe you try to play a character, something that you're not, that pigeonholes you, that bottle caps you, that I believe it doesn't allow you to reach your true potential. That's just me,
Right.
you know, because I've always been trained to be you and who I am. I know who I am at my core. I'm an athlete. I've been an athlete all my life. I've amateur wrestling all my life. Kickbox, box, taekwondo, kempo, MMA, pro wrestling. So now here we are. So it's who you see in the ring. It's not for show. It's me. It's just me, you know, doing what I do. And I've come to know that I don't have to play to the crowd. I never have. Even when I was, coming up in the business, I've never been one to play to the crowds, but the fans have always gravitated to me because I believe that my characters are real because they are. It also helps that you have a nice mouthpiece, and she is very good when it comes to promos. You know, I do not have to worry about doing too many promos. She does an excellent job at doing it, and it's just my job, not only as her husband, but as her wrestler, to make sure that I execute that, thoroughly. And that makes it even more impactful because she's my wife. Of course, I'm gonna execute it thoroughly, to the best of my ability. Just because why wouldn't I? It's different when you have a manager and then you have a manager that you have a relationship with, not just
Right.
whether it's marriage or whether you are individuals like real life friends like Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman, or Paul Heyman and CM Punk. They're real life buddies, So what you see on camera, that ain't fake. It's real. And when you see us, you don't see fake. You see real. You see real concern when I get hurt. From her. If you see her get angry, it's for a reason. It's for a reason. So it's she's a sweetheart, man, and I'm honored to have her here with me, and she makes my job even more worthwhile to continue to prove that pro wrestling is a sport. It's a sport outside of entertainment. Again, I choose to believe that it's a sport, and I will continue to strive for it to remain as a sport. Those individuals who want to continue making it entertainment, that is your prerogative, and I'm not knocking one for doing that
Right, for
in
doing
no
it.
way, shape, but again, like I said, it's to each his own, and there are those promotions out there, in the world, in various parts of the globe, who still believe that it's a sport, and you have those out there, and it's finding them, and before we go, I invite anyone, I mean, as long as you have a great product, you know, um, we invite you to to come and take this journey with us. I mean, it's an awesome concept, and if we all choose to pull our resources together, and our knowledge, and everything that makes what we believe makes pro wrestling great for the
Hmm.
for the indies, you know. Yeah, we come here, come on over here, and let's change that landscape, man. Let's change it. Let's make a new era for pro wrestling, because this is where we're at now. The era. We're in a new era. You know, WWE has already proven that, yanking the curtain down. And then you see a lot of the monopolization, of what they're doing, and of course, the big time, they're collaborating to do what they do, and you have your indie promotions out here who are striving to make it, but they're overshadowed,
Hmm.
and we're going to call a spade a spade. They're overshadowed, but you have to understand that there is something over here on the horizon that we are trying to build, to make sure that what is overshadowed, it's fair and square. There's no other way to put it. You see what I'm saying? If you
Oh
if
yeah.
you if you can't beat them, you don't join them. You join with the ones that are gonna that are gonna stand. They're gonna stand and build and be that beacon. And that's what we choose to be. We choose to be that north star. For those individuals who dare to dream big. Who those promoters who want better for their own promotions and for their own rosters. and for those individuals who want to make it to WrestleMania, but realistically, if they feel that, hey, my time has come in the sun, really, is it?
It was truly great to sit down with Deirdre and Kurtis. The love and passion that these two have for the wrestling business is incredible. And they both have such creative minds that I didn't get the chance to dive into. The next time that I have, I'm going to sit down and we're going to have, a conversation about the state of wrestling right now and how they see it progressing into the future and what they think they can bring to the wrestling business. But, once again, Deirdre and Kurtis, thank you for joining me. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight, last night, and tonight for this part 1 and part 2 series of Sitting Down with Kurtis Black and Deirdre Penance. And always remember, you can always watch the replay of Who's the Champ on WCBD Plus Carousel right at the bottom of the homepage, and also now on CountOn2.com. All you have to do is just click the WCBD Plus app tab right at the top of the screen and select Who's the Champ to see previous episodes. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.